If you don't know the people around you, please make sure you at least say hello to someone you've never seen before. Now, I don't mean that in a trivial way, but actually the way networks work in parishes are really important. Find out who the person next to you comes from, because one thing that actually inhibits growth is when we live in our parochial units, where actually we're going to have to move out of that in the next 5 years in the diocese, as we begin to think about how we can be called to bear fruit in a much deeper way. So I ask you to do that. I'm going to give you some practical things. We have to do this housekeeping, so excuse me before I let Martin loose. So the slides for the workshop presentations will be placed on the agency website next week. You'll find those from the last 3 years on the newly redeveloped agency website, so you won't have lost out on those. Downstairs, you've already seen representatives from 3 publishers: the Catholic Truth Society, Isaiah Books, which is some fabulous books for little ones, and do have a look at those. And Hodder, who were the publishers of Martin's book Credo in Slow Motion. There are various other apostolates have brought flyers for their offerings, so you'll see things in your orange bags, and there will be other things as you go through the day. Most of you will have heard about Some Definite Service. It's the diocesan-wide approach to parish growth in evangelization, catechesis, and formation. Each parish is invited to develop plans in these 3 interconnected areas. It's slow to get it going, but I want to engage you all in that. Each person is asked to discern what the Lord is asking of them in terms of your participation. We will take time in one workshop to explore this further with you. You've seen members of the agency, they've got the blue lanyards, so if you need to speak to them, please do. Last year, we introduced a new workshop venue, the Henderson Room. You'll see it on the signage. It's because of being able to offer more and because so many people are coming. I think about 230 people registered for today, which is superb. It was named after one of our auxiliary bishops, Charles Henderson, and it's the other side of the car park and in Bowen House. So if you're signed up for that workshop, that's where to go. And you'll see it in the book tip on page 17 to 19. And let's hope there's a fire alarm, please leave by the marked exits. Muster point is outside the cathedral gates. And we'd be grateful if at the end of the day, after Mass, which is at 4 o'clock, really grateful if some of you would help us stacking the chairs, because it's a big task. I mean, the agency's been here from before 8 o'clock this morning getting today ready. So that would be really helpful. In your booklets, you'll find the order of Mass for today, location of workshops, and you'll also find next steps on page 16 and some important dates for the next year. Also, right at the back of your pack is a feedback form. Please take a minute at the end of each session to jot down your comments, because it does help to develop the day from year to year. So that's the housekeeping. Now's the pleasurable bit, is to introduce you to Martin Kochanski. Most of you will know that he's the creator of Universalis. Oh, if you didn't, you know now. And the interesting thing is, if you go years ago, monks would stand round a great lectern with enormous books, they still do in the Cartesian houses, to sing the divine office. And then about the 12th century, the Franciscans, who were on the move evangelizing, created what we call the breviary in a small book, so it was portable. Martin, you've reduced the divine office now so we can carry it on a phone. Thank you and well done. He's also written the book, The Creed in Slow Motion, which is available downstairs. He's going to talk about it, so I'm not going to comment it at the moment. But the reason we've chosen this topic is because, as you know, this year is the 1700th anniversary of the First Council of Nicaea, from which we get a lot of the creed that we recite on Sunday. This is really an important marker this year, and it dangerous it gets obscured by other things. It's on this that Martin will offer us the benefit of wisdom and reflection, prayer and meditation. He's been sharing some of his thoughts about today's keynote talk on his Universalis podcast over recent weeks. Some of you may have picked that up. And we are convinced that you're going to enjoy what he's got to say today. So, Martin, thank you for coming. The creed is in our bones. Bless you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that welcome, and thank you all for coming and being here. It is absolutely terrifying to see a crowd stretching into the far distance and knowing that somewhere in another room there's another crowd sitting watching a television screen. This is... On the other hand, I shouldn't be too nervous about this because, after all, I do, in some sense, virtually have a big audience with the tens of thousands of people who use Universalis, the people who listen to the podcast, which last time I counted seems to be about 15,000, which is insane. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. If you're looking forward to hearing to what I have to say, well, so am I. Now, funnily enough, on the podcast a few weeks ago, I found myself referring to a bishop as an iceberg, because most of what he does and is hidden away beneath the water, and no one sees him. So looking at what is going on here, I have to say, it looks as if this diocese is an iceberg, that it's not just the things that are timetabled and the masses and so on in church, but there's a lot of real people doing real things underneath the water, and without you beneath the water, nothing will be sticking above the waves. So well done. One of the ways in which the church, or a local church, can easily rot and become senile is if we sit back and think of what you might call God as gas. You know how about gas? You get it from your gas company. You know about electricity, you get it from your electricity company. You know about your phone, you get it from your phone company. And you know about God, you get it from your God supplier. And you spend 1 hour getting topped up in the week. You then spend 167 hours being just like everyone else. So you are not those people. And that is lovely. You don't have to feel special about it, but it is how we ought to be. When Ingrid got in touch with me about this thing, I asked her what sort of people are going to be here, and she said yes. That it's everything from people who have kind of 3 doctorates in theology, and now I have to be careful. She didn't say this, but I kind of inferred it. People who didn't run fast enough when Father was asking for volunteers. And that's fine. Often that is the best thing, because you don't think you're worth anything and other people don't agree with you. Now, you know those other people are wrong, but you think you better prove them wrong, and then you discover in the end you are the best because you are in some sense closest to the people that you are talking to, guiding, teaching, whichever it is. So I have a picture of you in my mind that some of you are dealing with the zoo that is called the First Communion class. Some of you, I don't know what to call a confirmation class in contrast to that, but some of you are dealing with that, and some of you are in the calmer but perhaps deeper waters of adults who are becoming Catholics or who have been Catholics all their lives and now want to become them, which is, of course, a category. The title is all about the creed, and today is all about the creed, and this year is all about the creed. But I'm actually going to start with Universalis, partly because I want to talk about that as well, and partly because if we're trying to tell a story, in my life, that was what came first. And if you think of evangelization as being sowing the seed, and we all know that sometimes it's dry ground, sometimes it's stony, and all the rest of it. Well, what you might say something like Universalis is doing is providing the compost, that it is making the ground fertile, and that you don't necessarily find anything different in people who have acquired the Universalis habit, except that they are more fertile in due course. A lot of you sounded terribly familiar with Universalis, what was mentioned. I remember once going to the Catholic Liturgy office to ask them for permission for something or other. I thought, oh, I'd better introduce myself. So I got an iPhone and I put Universalis on that, and I got an iPad, I put Universalis on that, and I went out, and I laid out all these machines, and they said, oh, that, we're all using it. So could you, a horrible bit of audience participations, those of you who have Universalis, can you stick your hands up? All right, it's a decent... All right, it's a decent proportion, but not such a proportion that I...
What's the question again?
Who has Universalis? Yes. Right. So I think I can probably explain without boring you, because anyway, there's nothing as good as being told something that you already know. Now, the Muslims are famous for praying 5 times a day. It's the same prayer practically at every time, except for that frightful lie that they shout out first thing in the morning, which says prayer is better than sleep, which it isn't. We, on the other hand, we are Jews. And as the psalm says, 7 times a day I will praise you. And right at the beginning of the church, you see the apostles going up to the temple at the 3rd hour or the 6th hour or whatever it is. And one of the things, apart from the Eucharist, that we did was take over that aspect of Jewish spirituality. They had psalms, prayers, and readings. We have psalms, prayers, and readings. And it's a huge treasure. It's really wonderful. In a sense, perhaps there's too much treasure there, because how often do we get told about it, we the sheep? The Apostolic Constitution, Canticum Laudis, says, apparently I'm going to have to hold this up so I can read it, otherwise I'm crossing my eyes behind the microphone. The Divine Office is the prayer not only of the clergy, but of the whole people of God. So you don't think of it as being one of those things that specialists do. It's not a monks and nuns thing. It is an everyone thing. You have Lord's morning prayer, which is the prayer you do in bed in order to postpone getting up, or the prayer you do over breakfast, or the prayer you do on the bus on the way to work. There is terce, which comes from the Latin for the 3rd hour, and that is, well, coffee break prayer, I suppose, that comes halfway through the morning. Then you have sex, which is lunch break prayer. Then you have none, which is tea time prayer. And then you have vespers in the evening. And then, depending on your temperament, you either do Compline night's prayer before you go to bed, or you fall asleep to it which again is a lovely thing to do. There is in Universalis a sung Latin compline by the boys of the Schola Cantorum of the London Oratory School. And yes, you start listening, and then in the morning you realize, just a minute, I didn't hear the end of that. And it really does work well. The thing is that this is all for us. We are not for it. And it keeps us soaked in God. We never quite dry out. And what we want to be is a soggy people, always damp, always fertile. So that's your lightning summary of the Liturgy of the Hours or the Divine Office, whichever you want to call it. Where do I come in? Well, I'm sort of ordinary. I'm not a specialist. People sometimes email me and call me father, and I sometimes contradict them and sometimes don't bother. But no, I went to school at Downside, so I was, if you like, on the fringes of a monastic community. That meant that sometimes I and a few friends would trundle up to the abbey of an evening to listen to the monks singing Vespers. And it fitted quite nice. The prep period was 6:15 and Vespers was 6:30. So you had a feeling of relaxation, a feeling of spirituality, and a feeling of not quite being where you ought to be, which is, when you're in a school, is quite good and helpful. And about once a term, we would say, all right, let's get up early at 6 o'clock and go to Matins, just to prove we could. And it was helpful, even at that dosage, a couple of times a week. So when I was leaving and going to Oxford, I said, well, so where do I get more of this? And the answer was sort of nil. And I kind of forgot about it. I didn't know about the Divine Office outside a monastic context. I didn't know about the Liturgy of the Hours books. And when I did know about them, it seemed a terribly specialized thing to be doing. It's like when you want to get slightly fit and you find yourself with some kind of bodybuilding secrets of the Olympic masters. It's just too much. And you hear of someone like Thomas Merton, who used to read his breviary on the train, on long train journeys, and look what happened to him. He became a Trappist. So you just didn't want to do it. And I wandered around in this kind of equilibrium for a few decades. And then, well, the way I like to explain it was I was drunk. It was Easter 1995, and I'd been to the Easter retreat at Downside, and after the Easter Vigil and after another dose of the resurrection at Mass on Sunday, you are completely intoxicated and you feel yourself capable of anything. You're full up with the Spirit. And so I went into the Abbey bookshop, and there was sitting a second-hand edition, well, a second-hand 3-volume Divine Office. I thought, come on, don't be a coward. Why not? And I started trying to do it. And it's decently complicated because there's a cycle of 4 weeks for the Psalms, and there's a longer cycle for things like the readings and the Office of Readings, and then the Saints' Days jumping in as well. And so I tried it for a while, and suddenly I was hooked. What pulled me in case you want to try and find yourself doing the same thing, is the second readings in what's called the Office of Readings. This used to be called Matins and used to be completed at the crack of dawn, which is fine for monastic communities, less fine for everyone else. Nowadays, it can be any time of day. And it has 2 hefty readings. The first one is from Scripture, and the idea is that it gives us big, long, meaty chunks, too long for Mass, and possibly needing more concentration than a Mass reading might do. And then the second reading comes from the early centuries of the Church, from the Fathers of the Church, or about the specific saint. I was on the train today coming here, and there was something like 11 minutes for the next tube to come to Battersea Power Station. So I thought, come on, try it. So I went to the Office of Readings page in Universalis, and I pressed the play button, put my earphones in. And as we were leaving Nine Elms, we had a letter from St. Andrew Kim Dagon, who is the martyr for today. And that letter lasted me all the way to Waterloo. And it's perfect. It works wonderfully like that. And just about Easter time, these things are particularly splendid because they come from the very, very early times in the church, and they represent people still stunned, still completely reeling from this wonderful thing that has happened, and trying to react to it in some way. And that energy, it was so wonderful. I thought, why doesn't everyone do this? And, well, if you look at the books, you will see why everyone doesn't do it. As the canon said, they are 3 fat volumes of about 2,000 pages each. You have a 4-week cycle, you have a yearly cycle, you have heaven knows what. You pick this from that cycle, and you have to jump over to match that. So not only do you have to have strong arms to carry your book, but you also need a degree in airline timetables to decode it all. And I was getting more and more addicted to this. When I visited Istanbul with friends, I'd already switched to Latin because I read that much, much more slowly than English. And a vice of a reader is that you just read fast. And so, for instance, sitting in the morning waiting for my friends to come down for breakfast, I would read about that lovely passage, and I can't tell you which psalm it is, where we're celebrating all the works of the Lord, and Leviathan, the sea monster whom God made to play with. And I thought, well, yes, this is absolutely it. I would sometimes sit in the back of a mosque with my Latin breviary in my hand, reading one of the hours. No, yes, it's big. Yes, it's complicated. I happen to be half man, half ship. Big, well, it's a quantity of data, not a particularly big one, really. It might be a few seconds of movie or a really detailed picture. That few bytes. Complicated, well, what are computers for? This is an algorithm. You follow the algorithm. So I thought, let's do it. And at that time, this was before the internet was really burgeoning. So the first idea was to do it as a CD-ROM. Because those apparently were going to be the things we're going to use in the future. But as I was doing it, the internet came along, and so the great thing about the internet is you can fake it. You can, as long as you're a week or two ahead of time, then you're giving people what they need today in the coming week, and they don't need to notice that you haven't got what is coming in 6 months' time. So that worked. First of all, I translated the Psalms from the Latin myself in order not to have to fuss with the owners of the stuff. And I linked to the Bible, a Bible site somewhere, just to have something. And then I thought, I really want the same texts that you have in the books. So let's pretend to be a business. So I made apps and programs for Windows and for the Palm, which was a kind of Palm top personal organizer thing at the time. And I approached the publishers and I said, look, here you are. I want to sell this. What percentage do you want? And that they understood. And so it all worked. And this pottered along nicely. I would sell codes. In fact, I still buy codes now. I sell codes and they would work on whatever device people wanted to use them on. And that went on until the iPhone. And in the early summer of 2008, Apple sent out a circular saying, if you submit your apps to us by Monday, then we will include them in the App Store when the App Store opens. It was then a Thursday. I didn't see much. The App Store opened. At the end of July 2008, I got an email from Apple saying what had been sold, and the email had 9 lines in it, and I thought, well, yeah, all right, so I haven't been promoting it, and it's only 3 weeks' worth anyway, and so on. And then I looked again the next day, and there was this column labeled quantity. And this was not 9 sales, it was the sales they'd made in 9 countries. And in the first 3 weeks, as many people had got Universalis as had by other means in the 2 years beforehand. And so the thing boomed and grew. People wanted extra languages. The Nigerian bishop said, could we have it in our languages, please? And so I said, yes. Yes is a very good thing to say because it puts people off and they never come back. So the score now, almost 20 years after that, is that Yoruba has been done for both the Mass and the hours. And because there's an energetic priest who just does all the cutting and pasting so that I can put it in my database. They have yet to find anyone to do Hausa. And Igbo, I think one of the problems was that they had to invent a kind of neutral dialect so that they had a church version which everyone from whatever region would recognize as, no, this is not quite ours, but it isn't our neighbor's either. And it may be something like that. But anyway, whatever reason, I haven't got Igbo. On the other hand, I do have Malayalam, which took me weeks to learn to pronounce, and is beautiful because it's not in the Latin script. Setswana, Latin, because at some point an organization called the Midwest Theological Forum, there's a priest there called Father James Socias, who has incredible amounts of energy, gave me all the Latin texts and put me in touch with someone at the Vatican who gave me permission to do so. Remember, all this is unofficial. I'm afraid at any moment, if the Vatican get to hear it, they'll say, oh no, we're going to have a proper official project, you stop. But no, they were helpful. They gave me a license and so on. So we have English and Latin. Estonian, of all things. Danish, Irish Gaelic. My parish priest said, could I have the Greek New Testament in parallel, please? So I sneaked that in. A charming archbishop from Madagascar asked, could he have the Liturgy of the Hours in Malagasy? So I said, look, yes, you just copy and paste into the right places. He had no idea what he was doing, so I ended up having to do it. So that was kind of 3 weeks of hell. And yes, as has been pointed out, in my left hand, I have a normal iPhone. In my right hand, I have an iPhone with the entire Liturgy of the Hours and the readings of Mass and everything else on it. Same size, same weight. So there's no reason not to have everything with you the whole time. And that transforms how you react to something like the Liturgy of the Hours. You can be regular about it, or you can dip in from time to time for nutrition. Or if you're curious and just read the day's reading at Mass, whatever, or read about the saint of the day, it's all there. If you're blind, that's no problem. These devices will read things out loud to you. Or you can subscribe and you can hear my voice reading it to you as well. And, well, I didn't mean to look, but I happened to notice yesterday Universalis is the 3rd most popular app in the lifestyle section of the Apple App Store. And I started a podcast about a year and a half ago, and that seems to have about 15,000 listeners, which is all rather appalling. So that's Universalis for you.
What happened with Spanish?
Well, the answer with what you might call the big languages is this, that I tried with French. I found a priest in Paris who expressed interest, and I said to him, look, this is the deal. Basically, you copy and paste all the little bits into all the right places, and make sure that I have permission to use the texts. And so he said, all right, I'll talk to the diocese or whatever. The trouble is that the church as an organization, really like all big organizations, if something doesn't need thinking about, then it doesn't even have what to think with. The people who had put together the breviary last time they did a new edition, have long since gone to other jobs. So you've got a point where nobody knows who could even try to answer this question. As I was lucky really with English and just going ahead and doing it. But with French never went anywhere. Spanish, similarly, the trouble is, with the big languages, Spanish, German, whatever, it would be lovely to have it, but the initiative has to come from the church in question. Someone needs to want to find out who owns the texts, what sort of arrangement to make. Are they going to make the text available free to me, in which case they'll be free in Universalis, or are they going to have to pay the owner of the Bible translation, of the liturgy, or whatever? There's quite a bit of thinking to be done, and what tends to happen is that within the individual countries, there are people who know people, and some sort of network happens. So this is why it all tends to be rather kind of fringe minority languages, which is frustrating, but, we'll get there, I think, in the end. So, who is it all for? Well, adults, obviously, because you can work out your own schedule. You can decide not to commit yourself to too much, but you always have to dip into, whether it's coffee, lunch, tea, or whatever. You can do it. If you're waiting for a train, then as I did, you can listen to something. Now, you are, a lot of you now working with groups. So I suppose it's time for me to be a salesman. And let me give you two examples. In Arabia, there is a family, somewhere in the Gulf states, I think, who've made it their particular mission to run courses for people to be readers at Mass in Arabia and in India. And so from time to time, they order a batch of 12 codes so they can give a code to each of the people on the course, so that during the course they have access to all the readings, and then for the rest of their life they have access to all the readings. So that's a group, and I give them a nice hefty discount for doing that, and I'm happy doing that because people are benefiting. And then the other thing I discovered recently, or that I heard, people wrote to me from Singapore saying, right, we are running a youth community of some kind. So how much for 100? And two separate people did this in Singapore. So I told them, look, this is, you're an amazingly energetic church. What's the secret? And they said, well, because we're so small. So there is plenty of prospect there. One of the things, as you try to get in touch with each other, think, how can we put a group together? Because once everyone has access to the readings, to the liturgy, so easily, then that's a gift for the group and a gift for each of them individually for life. Some of you are dealing with people who are being confirmed. Now, when people are of that age, then their world tends to be rectangular and black and this size. So anything you can do to pull them out of that is something. But the other thing that's going to happen with them is that they are probably going to forget most of what they've learned. And they are going to come back to it. This is the frustration and the joy of dealing with people with confirmation. So let them establish the habit. And look, if you gave them a lovely, elegant book, a missal or whatever, then it would follow them around for the first few places they are staying. It will be part of their box of possessions that goes with them one place to another. And at some point, it will fall out and be forgotten. If you give them something that's on their phone, it will be there forever. And it will pop into their mind when the Spirit decides it needs to pop into their mind. There's somewhere where they can't immediately look at Instagram or TikTok or whatever succeeds those as being the thing you always look at. but there's always going to be a little bit there. Let's just look at the saint of the day. Or I feel rather jangled, let me press the play button and listen to the rosary, or something like that. And it's always there as a resource. So in that sense, it's a gift for these people, a gift for life. First Communion is an exercise in embarrassment. The parents send the child to be taught all the things the child needs to in First Communion, and the parent doesn't quite know what's what, because the parent has been taught this or that long enough ago that they're afraid of being of getting it wrong. And so what parents can do then with something like Universalis is, well, let's look at the saint of the day. Here's a picture, here's a little bit of story. Or if you manage to have some kind of family prayers in the evening, pick Compline or pick just a prayer from Compline, something like that. There's a lot of raw material there. So again, think about getting it. You don't, when the First Communion parents are not going to be worrying about doctrine. And that really is what I wanted to say about Universalis, because after all, the title of this thing is the Creed, and I want to address the Creed, because the next thing that happened with all this, with Universalis, was that, yes, we're going to have fun with that. The thing that happened with Universalis was that I had an email from Andy Lyon at Hodder saying, wow, I love the way you write. Have you written anything that publishes a book? And I kind of thought about it. And then I realized that the Creed was something that I wanted to be able to write about. And so we'll have a brief break now so that you can say hello to your neighbors. And yes, the reason for this particular thing up on the screen is as follows, that the Creed is there because of heresy. The Creed does not tell us that water is wet. The Creed does not tell us that 2 and 2 make 4. All the Creed says is things that people at one time or another have disbelieved, misunderstood, or wanted to deny. That is why these things are in the Creed. I had a very dear friend called Corinne with whom I used to go around art galleries, and you know how with an art gallery you get used to, well, read the label, glance at the picture, read the label, glance at the picture. It's just hopeless. So we found a project which was in each room, we looked at them like that, and then we each look for the picture we'd most like to steal. Because then you don't think about, oh, this is important, oh, this is admirable, oh, this is art. You actually relate to it as something real. So here we are. What is your unfavorite clause of the Creed? It might be something that you just don't understand, or that you think you understand and you hate as a result. And so let's take 4 minutes or so, because I've been overrunning a bit, and talk to your neighbor and see what it is that you find the most awkward about the Creed. And so what I'll do to help you, you've got printed copy there, and I think it should be up on the screen as well. So do that, and we'll be back. I'll have a quick drink, and we'll be back in 3 or 4 minutes. Summarize a book in a few minutes. If you could, then you wouldn't write the book. You would just use the 3 minutes, and I'll do it like that. The basic origin of the thing, funnily enough, the first phrase in the Creed I thought about with all this was et incarnatus est. And he was put into meat. And I thought, yes, just a minute, our English translation is rather nice. And let's look deeper into it. And we get, if you think about it, most of our theology, most of us, from the same basic sources. We get the theology from Richard Dawkins and his other noisy companions, who tell us what we believe and what nonsense it is. I was once taken by friends to a talk by Stephen Hawking, where he conclusively disproved the value of Scripture as follows. Good English does not begin sentences with conjunctions. Here is a carefully calculated chart showing how many sentences in each book of the Bible begin with the word "and." There you are. No more argument needed. We can all go home and not bother with any of this superstitious stuff. He's just disproved it. So that is one source that we have from being told what we believe and what we think. Otherwise, we see religion portrayed in films. So you get what a scriptwriter thinks religion is, which is all holy and spiritual and ethereal and certainly nothing to do with meat. And so that is something we need to correct. And then behind it all, because this is a Protestant country, we have the basic Protestant principle that human nature is irredeemably corrupt, and that we cannot achieve anything ourselves. In particular, there's no point in reasoning about anything because our reason won't work either. And as I was going through all this, I saw more and more what a kind of logical structure behind the creed. I mean, you can put it in a simple epigram and you can say, there's nothing that is true because it's in the creed, but there's a lot that's in the creed because it's true. And then we should go further than that. We shouldn't obediently tick off, all right, I've understood that, so now I suppose I believe it. But we should say, this makes sense. Let me try and work out what kind of sense it makes. And having thought that far and thinking, gosh, am I sticking my neck out or something? Is this book going to be attacked as saying different things or saying the same things in different words? I realized something which may or may not be obvious to you all, but it wasn't obvious to me then until I realized it. There is a point in the Gospels which is a very uninteresting and very unimportant point, by which I mean that although all the evangelists put it in, they can't remember who said what. This is the thing where Jesus is talking to, I think it's a lawyer or something, I can't remember, and the greatest commandment of love is enunciated, that you do it with all your heart, all your strength, all your mind, and that's that. And what I mean by important is they clearly thought that this was just normal. But if you look in the Old Testament, the mind isn't there. The mind has been added. Now you can think, did Jesus add it? Or was it the Jews' contact with the Greeks, who are nothing but mind, something that caused that? But yes, we have our minds and we should try and engage with all this stuff and make sense of it. If it doesn't seem to make sense, we try to make sense of it. And even if it is the wrong answer, we can get from there because we have thought about it. We can then argue with someone else, not face to face, not nose to nose, but shoulder to shoulder. Here we are with our slightly different perspectives of this thing, left eye, right eye, but we are looking at the same thing. And so more and more, this became an extremely fruitful way of approaching it. If you want a book that tells you where the Nicene Creed came from and where this doctrine came from and all the details, this is not that book. Sometimes I like to explain by saying, rather helplessly, well, I'm a mathematician, you see. And the trouble is that's exactly misunderstandable, because sometimes people think of a mathematician as being someone who loves to learn the formula, and when he's learned the formula, then he has the power of the formula, and gosh, isn't that good? But there's a different mathematical attitude, which is that every time you're given a formula, you know it's come from somewhere. You know it's been worked out by someone, and you want to work it out for yourself. That this is something not something that you need to memorize. It's something you can forget. And so if I look back in deep down in the creed, everything makes sense. I can try and make sense of it. This business of the goodness of matter, for instance. We all know that the very, very spiritual people that you see in films are above all that kind of thing. Well, here we have a God who intentionally created everything, and the only possible reason for doing that was because it was good. Not only that, he decided to be made of it. Not only that, but we have coming up, none of us is destined for heaven, because heaven is a place for the spirit, and we are destined for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. We are naturally body and spirit together. It will be a very different kind of body, probably from the one we have now, but there still is going to be that almost federal structure in each of us, well ordered, because all the disorder caused by the fall has disappeared. But all that is sitting there in the creed, and normally we don't hear it, because normally when you encounter the creed, you're not holding it in your hand, as many of you are now. You're not glancing at it for the sake of having something to glance at. You're standing up in church, keeping in step with each other, and if you dare to think for a moment about Jesus becoming incarnate for our salvation, if you think more than 3/4 of a second about that, you're going to be out of step with everyone else. It's a disaster. In that sense, the whole business of we should be active participants in the liturgy tends to make us performers. And so step back, and this is what the Creed in Slow Motion does. It doesn't necessarily need to be read from beginning to end. It could really be a Lou book, the kind of thing you copy and you just take a chapter at random and you read a chapter. And that's it. It's meant to stimulate you. And the Creed is our bones. Well, painstakingly you try and get your adolescents to come into a relationship with all this. It's very different from what everything else that they're doing at school, because everything else they're doing at school is resolved into problems that have an answer, problems that have a right answer, and so you give the right answer. And you are opening a door for them to adulthood, where things aren't resolved into problems, where you approach these things, encounter them, and each time you encounter them, you get closer to them, but never to the point of being able to say, here's a summary. Here's what it all is. And this is the frustration and the glory of teaching confirmation, because they are going to forget largely the particular details. It's all going to get reduced down to the bare bones, and also to a particular attitude. And the thing about my aim, if you like, with the Creed in Slow Motion was to make an attitude one always of engagement. That no, it's not that you're asking a question you shouldn't ask, or they're not saying quite the right thing, but you are engaging. And the bones will lie there. And remember Ezekiel and the Valley of the Bones, with wonderful, wonderful passage where the bones begin to come together and begin to grow flesh and begin to jump around and be. In people's life, that will happen. You've created the stuff that turns into the bones, that turns in the end into the life. And yes, I'm more or less out of time on that. Let me give you one more image, though, another image of sowing the seed that I talked about in the Versalis as creating the compost. And that is why I think everyone should have Universalis, to be able to be permanently a little bit soaked in God, always able to connect without having to do something big and noticeable about it. But there's another thing about seed. One of the other places that seeds can fall is somewhere in a crack in rather heavy, dry, clayey soil, and it sits there feet below the ground, and nothing happens, and nothing happens, and nothing happens. And then a tree falls over, a fence post falls over, some soil gets churned up or something, and the seed comes to the surface. People's lives in the long term are very turbulent things. There's a long, long period of smoothness, and then everything is turned upside down. And if you have sown that seed, which may be dormant for decades, then when it's churned up into the surface, then it has a chance to sprout. More than that, I almost have made more notes than I had time for. The creed is full of optimism. I believe in God, right at the very beginning. No science can function without some foundation. We are asserting something extra, that we have a personal relationship with this first cause. That is what people who don't want to believe with us should attack. Not the existence of a first cause, because you can't have physics without a first cause. You can't have mathematics without justification from outside it somewhere. But the idea that we can have an I-you relationship with the infinite, that is maddening. It's almost absurd, and yet it's true. There's so much to discover, and I could end up just reading the whole book to you, really. I very nearly, looking out for quotations, found myself wanting to quote the whole of it. It came out 4 years ago, I think, now, so I think I'm allowed to feel some distance from it. So I commend you the book. I'll be downstairs later on signing it if you want a copy. Absolutely do something about Universalis, because you need it. And thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for listening, and I hope enjoying it.
More than generous with us, because you've given us 2 talks this morning. One was about the liturgy and actually how it's for us. And it's not something that's rarefied. This is what the council, the Second Vatican Council, was about, was to draw us into the liturgy of the hours, to be prayed and nourish us and to get into our bones in the same way that creed is. And that's your second talk, which, and I commend your book too. You use some lovely phrases like, the trouble is we all believe that God is gas rather than a person. And I like the way you describe yourself as half man, half chip. That's very good. But that charming way of putting theology is what the creed in slow motion is stuffed with. I promise you, I would give this to my godsons. I have 4 actually, because it's directly accessible, and what it will help them to do is to meditate on deep mysteries. Meditation is not some weird rarefied thing. It's something where we chew the mysteries that God has given us with the teeth of our souls. And Martin used all sorts of very interesting images, similes, metaphors throughout the book. And that's what I like about it, because they're ones that you can remember. This book is both profound and amusing. It's profound because it takes you deeper into the profundity of the mystery of the Trinity. It's amusing because of the way you describe it, your anecdotes and your particular ways of approaching things. But it's amusing in another sense of the word amuse. it gives us a muse, something to inspire us. That's what the muses did in Greek. And you do that with your book and with Universalis. And we thank you very much this morning. Thank you. Briefly, I want to... do you want to say the Angelus? Was it not? Yeah. The angel of the Lord declared unto Mary, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Behold, the handmaid of the Lord. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. And the Word was made flesh. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Pray for us, O Holy Mother of God. Let us pray. Pour forth, we beseech thee, O Lord, thy grace into our hearts, that we, to whom the incarnation of Christ thy Son was made known by the message of an angel, and by his passion and cross, be brought to the glories of his resurrection through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.